Hello and hello, welcome to this edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, and that man over there, I never know which way to point because the way it works. But this guy here is Jay Ruane, and that guy there is Seth Price. He is down in DC at the Price Benowitz and Blue Shark headquarters. Seth, how's your week going this week?
It's going well, and between, as you know, travel, heavy during the spring and fall. So when you have a few weeks at home, it feels very decadent.
I love being home. I am a homebody. I want to sit on my couch, not talk to anybody. I think I'm going to be that old man in the retirement community, sitting on my porch, yelling, "Get off my lawn," and just watching the world go by. It's a thing. So spring is here. There are changes, and I got a question for you because this is something that came up. We're recruiting for a new lawyer position in our office. We're adding on a lawyer to a pod. And here's my issue. We have 6 applicants, I think, for the role. And I met, and they're going through the process, and one of them was ready for me. And the one who was ready for me has already made it through the first 2 rounds and got glowing reviews. Glowing, like, we love this guy. We want this guy. This is going to be great. Perfect fit, culture fit. Smart. Feedback we got from judges and prosecutors was, oh, that he'd be a great fit in your office, really knowledgeable and good. And so I'm thinking to myself, do we just jump and say, all right, we got the guy? Do we go through the process of doing these interviews with all these other lawyers that clearly are not going to compare to the one that I've met with, I like?
Look, right. And the question is, where are you? Because we've both been there. Is the J. Ruane machine really there? Is it a process? I talk about I can't believe the Gerstel factor. When we rushed a bunch of guys in college to our fraternity, and people came through, and there were 2 guys who were put up on the screen, their pictures, 1 and 2.
You guys really do that shit?
Yeah. I mean,
I thought that was a joke from Revenge of the Nerds.
no, it was Animal House, wasn't it? But no, but you have to remember who people are. But the 2 top people that came up, because there are a lot of like seniors that barely know anybody. They're like, oh yeah, I remember this guy. So, nobody's throwing beer cans like they were, I think,
Right.
but they were yelling legacy. But there was a guy who was like the #1 pick, smiled at everybody, was nice. Everybody saw what they wanted. He laughed at everybody's jokes, and it went through. So look, you're telling me, hey, we've done references, everybody there loved him, it's our record. Fine. But are you really at that level? Are you doing that? I know for myself, we've made many hires where we thought we were checking those boxes and stuff slipped through. So yes, if you actually are at the point where you can assess your culture in that person, have you shadowed the person, if that's even possible? It may not be with a lawyer, but like where the person's there and you see the questions they're asking. We do a lot of role play, ideally, but the fact is, yeah, once you get somebody amazing and you can assess the other resumes, you're like, there's nothing even close. Of course, yes, you're going to move forward. I think the misnomer, the misconception can be that very often we think we've done that, but we've fallen in love with something that may or may not be that. Now, again, you have other touch points. Let's hope you're all there. But then the flip side is, I don't know, this is again not in your case, but you could get there with, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and he wants 100,000 more than you're looking to give. There are all sorts of pieces with it. So yes, just like an apartment. I remember in law school, 3rd year, Dave went to a place. There's a line of 20 people. I get there. He'd been there first. I was in the door towards the end. He's like, we want this place. Give me a check. We slapped it down. We got the place. We didn't look at 20 other places. We knew it was right. Yes, but I think that you need to be very, very careful, present company included, that we can fall in love with things and think it's solving our all of our problems. And
Well, I mean, and think about this. I mean, this is hiring is a challenge. It's probably the biggest challenge for any law firm. But it's really the biggest problem for every business is hiring. I mean, look at my disaster of the New York Jets. They just got rid of somebody who they bet the franchise on 4 years ago, 3 years ago. They said this guy Zach Wilson's going to be our starter. He's a stud. He's going to be great. And then they did nothing to build around him and that type of thing. I mean, think about all of the brains and money that goes into sports drafts. As we start the NFL draft tonight, right? There are people who've been active in the industry, in the sports industry, in the football world for decades, and they bank on this guy is going to be a great
And
player,
some of
and then
that,
they fall apart.
well,
And
right. Well, look, there's that. Or you have the wrong guy at the top of the pyramid. Take the Giants with Gettleman, right? I mean, you have a guy making choices that doesn't maybe have the core values you want in place.
right, so in that respect, is it like, hey, look, if we're 50% plus on an applicant, let's take the shot because we don't have the time to go super deep on everybody. As long as we're getting, hey, some good reviews, they seem to, be interested and have the same core values as the team. Their resume speaks to that. They interview well. They want to be a team player. Fuck it, bring them in, right? And
Well,
see,
right,
because
but
they'll judge that
yes,
within 90
okay,
days.
yes and no. Okay, so lawyers, look, you have a more of a limiting factor, right? You have a bar requirement, you have a substance requirement. It sounds like we should probably talk about this, that you've seen some crackage or debate before where I like the third to eighth year, attorney, and you like the first to third year. It sounds like you've been playing around a little bit on the other side of the fence with some more senior people.
Well,
But
I have, and the reason why I have is I'm at a different point in my career. 10 years ago, I'd gladly hire somebody right out of law school and I'd be the teacher to teach them where they need to go. Now, my time is much more valuable to me because every day I'm alive is one day less that I'm going to be alive in the future. And so I am valuing my time more, and I would rather pay over market and have people that I don't have to spend as much time micromanaging the early training to. Because literally, I brought in somebody who was fresh and green right out of law school last summer, and it's been a train wreck, right?
look, nothing
Because
should be done on a sample of one, but it's
no,
all at risk. If you have 10 people, a third aren't going to end up wanting to do whatever area you're doing criminal law. They're like, screw that. A third might want to go into the government because it's an easier paycheck. And it's like, and you happen to be not one of those couple that will make it through that gauntlet, and so but one of the things I saw at the fireproof conference that really hit home, and it's harder to apply to lawyers than it is for staff, but the idea that you're hiring for traits and not skills, and that we do so much about what's on the resume. And I'm seeing people like Gary Vee talk about some of this over time. And I think you see it if you watch Shark Tank, when you see people who are investing in companies and you're like, why are you investing in this thing? You're like, it's the guy at the top that they're there. They're literally grabbing this person to be part of their portfolio, figuring they'll figure out a way to make a buck with time, whether or not that widget they have right now is perfect. And I think that like the more I think about it, and the more that we've focused in on our own core values, both at Price Balance and Blue Shark, the more that you could get there. And that is a big struggle because I have team members, particularly on the plaintiff side, they're like, we want an experienced pre-lit paralegal. And it's great. But what are the odds? The number of firms in our market that are complete crap, that are small one-offs with like really unethical practices and all sorts of stuff. Like, what are the like? How much value is there? And I sort of like, I want somebody who likes the idea of doing this. You don't want to bring somebody in who had been a corporate paralegal who comes in and now that they're a PI paralegal, like, this isn't for me. So at least somebody likes it if they're coming from that space. But I feel like we put a lot of emphasis on skills, and that at the end of the day, what makes somebody long term is whether or not they align with how you're operating. Because I literally just had this conversation this morning with somebody about when you change a job description because you've grown, or Jay decides, you know what, I want to morph this way. How many times have you heard that wasn't what I was hired for? And that, to me, if you can eliminate some of that by getting somebody who buys the Jay mission, to me, that's, again, you have to figure out how to train them. And if you don't have training, it's going to fall on its face. But the idea, are you getting somebody? So when you get this lawyer you're most excited about, when they hit that, and I would say with lawyers, it's easier because they're barred, what they do. If the bar becomes much lower, so when you have it. It's like, it's that because they're like, hey, they have the experience, we like them, they get along with everybody, they have that X, whatever it is, great. That's not going to fall off trees. And if you get it, you grab it. But I feel like we very often make hires based on the fact that they're that one person that has the experience to check a box. And you end up with turnover, present company included, because you've made the hire for experience, but you've really sacrificed a bunch of things to get that person in.
Yeah, I'll go back to saying it. Hiring and hiring correctly is harder than getting leads. It's harder than managing legal work out the door. It's really the thing that can have the biggest impact on your success, or the biggest detraction from your success is who are the people that are on in this boat with you on your journey.
No,
It's funny.
I'm going to go to that. Blue Shark, right? Getting people is so difficult that are amazing that we had an abusive client early on. It was somebody's deputy, and I had it was big deal client worth probably 6 figures a year, and I had to go to this guy and say, hey, look, you can't. Your person's treating our person like crap. We can't have that. I either need a different person or you. And the guy's like, no, that's my person. And we're like, sorry, I can't, we can't represent you because I'd rather keep the person than
Right.
have people quit because of that. The flip side is a great firm in Virginia Beach had the same conversation. One partner was off his rocker, and I went to his partner and said, hey, we'd love to represent you. And he's like, you know what? You're right. This guy's abusive in the office. I'll make sure that you don't have to deal with him. And we had a great 7, 8 year ride with them.
That's awesome. I mean, that's really, one of the things that I think you need to pay attention to is really just sort of making sure that you are keeping the diamonds that you have. And so that leads me to my next question. I believe now, after 25 years, that you should be paying a little bit above market so that there is no desire to test the water. Or maybe they test the water and they say, oh, I got it pretty good in my job. How much over market is the right number if you are going to apply that? Is it 10%? Is it
Well,
25%? It's certainly not 100%.
no, certainly not. And look, I'm going to quote back to the Fireproof Conference. I hope that's okay. But their attitude is they don't. They build enough around that's sticky. Now, we all don't have that when you're starting, and you may pick your core people and say, hey, but their philosophy, because they're large, is they're not going to pay better. If somebody wants a shekel more, they're going to go somewhere else. Make it so that this is a place that people want to be. If you take the statistics out
Yeah,
there,
but I'm going to push back against that, and I wish I could, ask John or Mike that, like, you get somebody who's young, right?
yep.
Say you get somebody who's right out of college working at Price Benowitz in a paralegal capacity or Blue Shark or whatever, and it's their first like real corporate job. Like, they get benefits. They're like an adult now, right? And 18 months, 2 years in, shit, this kid's got it. And this kid is a kid that could be a workhorse for us and be great. But they don't know that. And everybody in their cohort is saying, you got a job hop. Yeah, that's how you find out what you want to do. What do you do to keep that person from leaving? If you're like, this is a good person, I want to keep them.
I mean, I think you got to be competitive, but I got to tell you, what's going to prevent the job hopping is not 2 grand more. It's not. There's always somebody you can find, especially when they're junior. There are things that pay more that may have a cap, right? Meaning there are jobs you can get that will give you a higher salary than what you're willing to pay, even at the top of your range for somebody junior. And then if you haven't been able to show them the path they're on, there's a future that this is sticky, that is your job. Now, the good news is the job market flipped in the last 6 to 12 months, where it's a lot stickier for us, right? For once, right? But I would push back. And look, I'm not telling you that I don't pick 2 or 3 people in an organization and say, look, I'm going to make sure that they don't leave for money. Great. I get that. But truthfully, you probably can't do that across the board. And that if you don't have some stickiness beyond money, and where I saw this most closely was we had pre-COVID had everybody in-house on intake. Remember our basement filled
I
with
do.
people, right? And my model was recent college grads who were going to law school, or at least considering law school, and I'd keep them for 2 years. And I got some amazing talent. People have gone on to do incredible things. when law school became less desirous and then COVID hit and the great resignation was going on, the only place that we really lost stuff. Now we also had a disastrous manager at the time, which really hurt. But what I saw was the moment $2 more an hour is on the table, I lost people literally for $2 an hour. And if I
Wow.
was honest about it, and that was, I've always said that, and it was, right? We weren't, but, and would we have kept some of them? Maybe. If we were $3 an hour, well, maybe. But the issue was our widget wasn't good. Our manager was shit. He was not good to the people that were there. When he left and his deputy came in, it changed everything. And that I also lost the stickiness that they wanted to go to law school. If they were not going to law school or even considering it, a reference meant nothing, and they
Right.
just needed a job. And if something paid $2 more an hour or had a 10-minute closer commute, we were losing. And so to me, if you can make that package, now one of the things that's obviously huge right now is virtual. Some people are trying to push people back. What can you give somebody? If somebody buys into Jay, it's a pretty powerful person that is there. And when you look at like a Mike Morris in action, even though there's a Nakazel pushing stuff, there are people that believe in it almost in a cult-like manner. And if you can have raving fans, whether it be customers or staff, all of a sudden, not that you want to underpay anybody by any means, but that there's always going to be somebody paying a couple shekels more. And that if you're able to have something that keeps it sticky, because at least then, let's say something does come up. Hopefully they're not looking, but if they are looking, you're going to get that bite. And I've seen that as a Blue Shark. People came back to us and the guy said, hey, there's an amazing stock option plan. We're like, well, what is that really worth? Let's look at it and reverse engineer it and realize he was making more money with us the way we were paying him than he would even with some fancy plan, even if it went bonkers. And the idea being that you have that connectivity. And I think you only so that, and again, this isn't about like bagel breakfasts and pizza lunches, but if there is something that somebody sees both a future for themselves and a higher calling and purpose, those things come together and really keep things sticky.
So let's talk about keeping things sticky. At when you are interviewing or when you are onboarding or during their life cycle with you, at what point do you map out for them? Here are the next 4 steps that you can achieve in this firm, both financially, responsibility wise, lifestyle wise, status wise. Like, are you saying here are the 5 levels? We had Mike McCready on recently, and he talked about his tiers for his lawyers, and I'm wondering, is this something that I should be adopting and say, hey, look, you come in at tier 2, because that gives somebody, hey, I have the ability to progress at this firm in this role. I could do it for my staff. Here's, level 1, level 2, level 3. This is what you're responsible for. This is the benefits that you get, that type of thing. When are you talking to people about, where you're going to grow with this firm? Because I think people want to know that this isn't just a job that I'm going to have to ride out the clock for 45 years at. They want to know, where can I go with this?
And I think that what I have seen, and I think I'll give you the analogy. When we started this journey together 15 years ago, whatever it was, there was a lot of talk of core value. You had a lot of plaques on walls with nonsense that was prefabbed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until you sort of dug deep and said, okay, what do we really believe in? And made it genuine, did it stick
Right.
rather than just a plaque on a wall that somebody pointed to. And I think that, look, McCready is a genius and he has he made it systematic better than most. But to me, it's great when you state it, but it's better when people see it. So when everybody who's on the Blue Shark management team came up through the ranks, with one exception now, we finally made an outside hire for something, but that people see that possibility and they see people being elevated and becoming a team lead and that they see a path. And the flip side, years ago, we used to have 4 lawyers in DC doing criminal. It's down to 1, believe it or not. People have elevated to federal, but the Superior Court has just dried up like Philly and other major cities where arrests weren't made. And there was a woman who left, and I was always really upset when she left. She was solid. Actually, a Umansky recommendation. She moved from Florida to DC. Great personality, great woman. I still love seeing her. But she left. She's like, I'm number 4 on the depth chart. I can't go anywhere. I was upset, but she was right. So I think that if people see the opportunity in that path, now nothing's better than the McCready who lays it out, but you can lay it out all you want. If you don't see people moving, it won't happen.
Right.
When I was a baby lawyer, this firm was gobbling up other firms. It grew from like 35, 50 when I first heard about them, 75 when I interviewed. When I left 2.5 years later, it was 250 lawyers,
Wow.
right? So they were gobbling and gobbling. And they had this thing called the 4-year rule, which meant that if you lateraled in and weren't brought in as a partner, you had a 4-year waiting period before you could become a partner. Now, the irony was with the 8-year partner track generally, by the time that happened, they ended up abandoning all that, saying, if you have business, we'll make you a partner. Otherwise,
Right.
it flipped on its head. But I feel like that alone, the fact that there was a rule is positive, but then it comes with other issues.
Right.
So that's great as long as you do bring those along and you don't have the exceptions. But I think that in general, actions speak louder than words. And if people see it, because if this is Jay's fiefdom and nobody's really going to gain that power, great. But if you watch a McCready who's saying this is my exit plan and I'm putting people in place and I'm giving them, I just saw one of his top people applying for the AAJ leadership track. I mean, when you're investing in your people and sending them to CLEs, I'm convinced that a lot of these coaching programs, that one of their successes is it gives opportunities for staff because look, we've said this generically for how many years? You don't, should I send somebody off for a training class, like a junior DUI lawyer, right? Should I send them down to hang out with Kessler and those guys in a scuba diving class? If I invest in them, they might leave, but you don't invest in them, they might stay. So it's that
Right.
the more that you put that thought process on, that you have it, and part of it is we've both been there. How many times in our process have you had a person in front of you who are like, this is not the right person? And I can't, and so you're not investing in them, they're there. And I think that let's land the plane, as you get back to hiring the right people, which doesn't happen overnight, then you have people that you believe in, you brought them in, and if you have those raving fans, they see up track rather than reading you correctly that they don't have a future there.
Yeah, and I think, at some point too, you also have to understand your own personal core values different from the firm. And, if you want to train the next generation of lawyers to be criminal defense lawyers like I do, you can invest in people and you identify the ones that you think have potential. And look, I swing and miss sometimes. I have swung and missed. I have gotten some great singles, doubles. I have a couple of alumni from our firm that are doing amazing things in either state service or in other firms. And I think that back now, and I'm like, I probably at that point, I probably need to. They went looking for more money. They went looking for more opportunity. I wasn't doing all I could at that point. I was also deep in the weeds myself with the caseload. Now, as an administrator, someone who's looking down, I can see, hey, you know what? I've got somebody here. They're rough in this area, but they show that they have the capacity for it intellectually and mentally and just, and now it's on me to get them where they need to be able to continue with this journey. And I think, that's really to bring it back around. I mean, when you find somebody that you think can do the job, maybe you just hire them because guess what? Worst case scenario, you fire them. I mean, literally.
Well, right. And look, I'll open the kimono for a second. We hired somebody for a new position, which we know is fraught with peril, right? Because we don't have our systems down, they're not
Right.
dialed in. And the person is hired on the law firm side. And literally we mapped out what was it was an interdisciplinary type position. But we literally had a life moment this morning. The person who was theoretically their direct supervisor didn't realize they were the supervisor, was not engaging. Somebody else was sort of makeshifting that position, but they didn't have the skill set needed. So they were putting a band-aid on a situation rather than saying, hey, why is this not happening?
Right.
And so again, that's not going to happen when you're tiny, but the same concept happens where you're like, hey, we made this hire, we invested in. If that person were to have left, right, which they didn't, thankfully they're still here, and they've had a rough go, meaning there have been some positives, but some not positives. But we were like, oh, that if this person had walked out during this time, like we literally didn't set them up for success.
Right.
And they're like four different people they need to deal with. It's an unusual new position. It's not structured. And you're sitting there, and yet we literally, and it's on a micro level. I mean, how many times have you had this where somebody left and they say people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses or managers? And so, in these cases, figuring out, are you setting somebody up for success? We're pretty evolved. We don't make a lot of bad hires at this point. We've really dialed in. We do much more thoughtful, but it is certainly, we all live in glass houses. And even though we're doing a ton of stuff right, I woke up the other day and said, oh my God, we literally have a person that doesn't have the person who, it's just not right. And can it be fixed? It can be fixed. But what cost has this been to the person doing it who wasn't, like, if we're judging them on success, it's gonna take longer to undo and get it right, given that we weren't on top of it properly.
And that gets back to, my initial questions, because, I've probably, in 28 years of doing this, I've probably interviewed, I don't know, 600 people for all different types of jobs, and at least 100 lawyers in that time period. And when you sit down and you do an interview with somebody and it's a 45-minute easy conversation and you guys are in alignment on a lot of issues, maybe I don't need to interview 6 people for an open spot. And that's, but I
Well,
wouldn't,
that's a question.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that 25 years ago because I didn't have the life
Yes and
experience.
no, but I'd say the opposite. 25 years ago, you had to, because you were like, hey, I got this problem solved. I can go on to the next, something else is falling on my head. Let me ask you a question. Is somebody pre-screen those 6 people?
Oh yeah.
No, what are of the 6 people, the pre-screens, what are they saying about the other people? I'm guessing of the 6, there are 2 that are non-starters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so it's not really 6. So how many other people were in serious contention based on the initial screen?
So 3 of the 6 had potential. One went through the first round of interviews with the hiring committee that doesn't involve me.
Right.
My hiring committee is good. I have a lawyer who came to law after a career in HR.
Right.
So he has
Understood,
done.
understood. So what is that? So what did that person, was that person positive, negative?
That person was negative on the applicant.
Okay. Okay,
And
so okay,
said,
so good. So you really have, it's really, let's not talk about, it's not 6. You have one guy you haven't vetted yet that's even possibly in play. Get on the phone, have somebody get on the phone, do a second round and see if you can, say, oh my God, this person really should be in play. And the truth is, let's say you hire the first guy, right? Which sounds like you want to, right? You 2 people potential out of 6,
well, I'm still at 3. I'm still at 3.
I thought 1 was negative.
Well, no, that's the other person we got rid of. So now we're down to 3.
You're down to 3.
Yeah.
So look, you either quickly do some screening, or look, God forbid you had 2 good ones. You're telling me that you won't find a way to integrate that into your firm? God forbid you found 2 rock stars. Maybe not, but
Right. But and that's the question. Do you if you find a diamond, a rock star, whatever you want to call them, do you hire them and say, I'll figure out how to afford this person, without affecting your bottom line too much? Or do you just say, I'm taking a shot on the best opportunity, and if that doesn't work out within 45 days, hey, maybe this other one is still available?
look, we've done all of those.
Yeah.
And statistically, the one too good to be true very often breaks.
Yeah.
And like there's some other shoe will fall.
I mean, I look good on paper, Seth, and if I came in for an interview at Price Benowitz, I probably would make it through a couple of rounds, but I would be a terrible employee for you. But I've got trial experience. I can talk. I can sit and talk with Dave about legal strategies and that type of thing. I can talk to you about the business side of things and how I'm going to bring business in. I look really good on paper.
No. What I would say though, that's the irony, is that we've talked about this, that the person who's practiced too long, whether you're not a solo, but that we get a lot of resumes of somebody who's been a solo for 20 years. And they're like, now I want to do something. And look, I don't discriminate based on age, but it's like, if somebody hasn't broken free for all that time, it's like dating. If somebody's not been single and they're 55 and they've never been married, the odds that right now you're the right place for them to say, I'm giving up that singledom where I can go home and watch Netflix by myself and be in a relationship is not
Right.
that high.
Yeah. I mean, look, the reality is that hiring for I can get more leads. I can write more systems, but getting the right people in the right seats going in the right direction, that is the hardest part of running a law firm.
Agreed. But I would say that the people, I'll take my family law situation. I wish I could hire a bunch more family lawyers. Now, if I had a Jay Ruane of family law that was interested in mentoring and creating the pyramid, you can do great things. But if each hire has to be fully competent, that's almost impossible to scale. And so the question is, can you balance out and I would say that when we talked a couple of weeks back when you were like, hey, this was a system breakdown, like, nah, it's not a system breakdown. When you get to the point where you McDonaldize, we've had Michael Gerber on during COVID, right? Where he's only McDonaldize. If it's not like the more that you can get that granular, if it's possible, easier for speeding tickets than it is for felonies, the more that you can make it granular, the easier it will be to hire and scale because you don't need that independent thought piece in order to make it work. And while as great as you are at systems, they don't even scratch the surface compared to corporate America, where there really are massive checklists for everything.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we'll wrap up with this. You bring up the reference to like McDonaldizing it, but what's interesting about McDonald's? They have all these systems, but they no longer serve burgers the exact same way. You can customize your burger, and they can get
But
it
there's a system to do that.
right. But what I'm saying is that the consumer may not want the systemized way. I go into McDonald's, I don't want mustard on my burger.
Yeah, but
I
that's
don't
part
want
of
pickles.
that's their more evolved system where
Right, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying is that even with a Loctite system, you're going to need to have some flexibility to some extent, so that you can give the clients what they
no,
need.
but I would say, but that's the next piece, right? It's one thing to write a system if every burger is the same, but as you know, your burgers are not the same. Every
Right.
case comes with no pickles, triple mustard, whatever it is, and that unless you have the ability to write a system and have people follow a system that allows for that flexibility, it really limits your ability to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, folks. So that's going to do it for us here on the Law Firm Brooklyn. Thank you for being with us today. Of course, you can catch us anytime you are on the go by subscribing to the Law Firm Blueprint podcast, or you can watch our program here live in the Facebook group as well as live on LinkedIn every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. And be sure when you're watching us to comment on our videos down below and make sure to give us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much, Seth. Any final words?
No, have a great week.
Let's see who the Jets and Giants get. Next week, we can lament about the draft because I feel the Jets are going to go for a wide receiver and then hopefully stack our offensive line because we need both. What about your Giants? What do you need?
We need a lot. And I just, I've always trust the process. And that's why when we had a defective GM, it was so painful because we've always done best on the draft board. We've had a very disciplined, great ownership. And when that falls apart, everything falls apart.
Absolutely. All right, folks. So good. You're going out there when you're hiring, go best on the draft board, follow that system. That's what seems to work. My Jets are just
No, but that's assuming that you have somebody at the top that is good at doing that.
right. Exactly. All right, folks, that's going to do it for now. Bye for now.